Welcome back. So in this lesson, we're finally going to get into our pop animation, and for this, we're going to be using shape layers. Shape layers are essentially After Effects' answer to Illustrator, if anybody's familiar with that program. They're basically a vector drawing layer, so you can draw your vectors into this layer type. Lots of tools that are similar to Illustrator in lots of ways, although it's very much stripped back. But the main difference with After Effects is that you can animate all the properties. So without any further explaining, it's better to just have a look, so let's get to it. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to make a shape layer, and the shape layer is going to be a line so that we can make our pop. So if you think about how the pop is constructed, it's a ring of lines that are expanding out from the middle. A lot of the things in After Effects is figuring out the simplest ways of doing things. So you can obviously make every single line and animate it, but what we're actually going to do is a clever way to use shape layers so that you can make one thing and have it repeat multiple times in a circle. So to make a shape layer, we're going to click on our pen tool at the top here, and we're going to just click on the screen and make a line. I'm not going to put it right in the middle. I'm going to offset it slightly because I don't really want the lines emanating right from the middle because it will make kind of an ugly star. I want a gap in the middle. You can make it however you want to, but I don't really want my lines to touch in the middle, so I'm going to make it slightly to the right, and we're going to make a line going off to the right, and we want it to be dead straight. So I'm going to click where I want the line to start, something like that, and I'm going to hold shift, and I'm going to click where I want the line to end. So I think I'm going to make the burst about that big, something like that. There we go. So now we've got a path here. And as you can see, it's now made a shape layer in the composition. So it's put this blue block here, which is indicating how long that shape is on for, and it just makes it for the entire length of your composition. You can see it goes from 0 to 10 seconds here, like we made in the composition settings, and it's made shape layer 1. So when you click off it, because we haven't added any look to the shape, you can't see it at the moment. Yours might be different. You might be able to see it. It actually has, for me, it's made a black stroke. You can see the shape layer settings at the top of the window here. You can see fill and stroke, which are two things you can apply to shape layers. It's got no fill, which is indicated by that red line, and it's got a black stroke, indicated by this black box, and the stroke is 2 pixels wide, and because it's black on black we can't see anything. But just to give you a bit more of an intro to shape layers, because it's kind of difficult to see with one single line, if you create a shape you can close it, so you can create any kind of line, and these are Beziers, so if you drag and click it will create a curved line. If you just click it will make a straight line, and if you click back on the first point that you made, it will close the path. And if I click on the settings up here to change it so that you can actually see it. So if I click on the fill, it will give you a color box. So let's just make it red for the moment. And if you click on the stroke, I'm going to make that blue. Actually, let's make it a bit more visible. I'm going to make it green. And then I'm going to increase the size of the stroke. So this is a shape layer. This is a shape, and I've given it a red fill, and it's got a green stroke. So the stroke runs along the actual path, and the red fills the inside of the path. So if I click on the shape that I just made, and press this little arrow on the left of the layer, there's a few layer options here. It might look a bit complicated at first, but we don't really need to worry about any of these for the moment. So let's just roll down this arrow, and then we'll roll down contents. So you get contents and transform. Transform is something that comes with every single layer in After Effects, whereas contents is particular to shape layers. So we're going to open up the shape layer contents, and then you get shape 1, because you can have multiple shapes within a layer. So we'll roll down shape 1, and you can see that it's got path 1 because you can have multiple paths in a shape. And if we open that, you can see the path in there. Then if I roll down stroke, we can see some stroke settings as well as our green color. And you can also see your stroke width here, 31, which is the same as up here. And you can also see that we've added a red fill with some other fill settings as well. But we don't need to worry about the settings for the moment. It's worth noting that these settings inside the shape layer are the main settings for that shape layer. You can change the shape layer settings using these ones up here, but these ones are more for creating new shape layers. So these are the settings that if I made another shape layer now, it would take these settings. But if you want to change your shape layer that you've made, it's probably better to use the settings inside just in case, because once you start having multiple shapes with different settings inside one layer, this one doesn't really change it anymore. I think it might change all of the shapes, and it's maybe not what you want to do. So I'm going to delete that second one for the moment, and we're going to focus back on this line that I made. So let's roll out this shape layer, roll out contents and shape. We're going to go into the stroke settings, rolling down stroke, and I'm going to change this to white. So under color, we're going to change the black to white so we can actually see what we're doing, and just make it bigger so that we're sure that we're doing it. I'm going to change this to maybe 4, so that it's kind of like a nice thin line. I'm going to change the line cap from butt cap to round cap. Make it clear. I'm going to increase the stroke width so you can see what it's doing. So that's actually rounded now, whereas before butt cap is kind of like flat. I'm going to make it round cap. So I'm going to string that back down to 4. Okay, before we go any further, I'm going to save my project. So I'm going to go File, Save As, Save. Okay, so I've just imported something just for myself for reference. This is just for me making it. So in this window, you can have folders. So if you click on this button down here, you can make folders. This is just for organization. And let's say I wanted my comp in there, you can put it into the folder. So this is just like an organizational thing. This is just my other balloons just for reference so that I can see what I'm doing. And maybe a good idea as well is to rename our comp to pop. So if you click on your pop and if you press enter, you can rename that. I'm going to call this pop 01. If you right click, you can also rename it here. I'm also going to rename the shape layer. So if you press enter on the shape layer, that will let you rename it. And I'm just going to call that pop. Cool. I'm just going to make the stroke width a little bit bigger. So it's going to be stroke 11. It's a bit thicker, so it's a bit more visible. And just to quickly note as well that when you make a new shape layer, it puts it right in the middle. So this dot here is called an anchor point, which is maybe familiar from what I said earlier because there's an anchor point moving tool here, but it puts it right in the middle of the composition, and I want my pop to radiate around from the middle. So keeping everything locked to the middle like this is really useful for when you're positioning it later, because later on we can just drag this whole composition to the middle of the balloon and it will pop exactly where you place it. Even if you can't see the actual pop itself, you'll know where the middle of the composition is. So it's just much easier to keep everything nice and tidy and in the middle. So what we want is we just want a stroke on the path. So we don't want the fill. So if your fill is on, you probably can't see it if you've drawn a perfectly straight line. But if it's on, it's best to turn it off. So you can use these eyes here to turn all of these things on and off, including the layer. So if I turn the layer on and off, you can see that it just completely disappears. And you can turn the stroke on and off, but we want the fill off. And in fact, I'm just going to delete the fill because we don't need it at all. So either hide it or click on the fill and press backspace and then it will just go. So we don't need that. Great, so let's quickly recap what we covered in this lesson. First, we found our pen tool, which is located at the top of the window in After Effects where the tools are, and we clicked in the comp viewer so that you can start drawing in your shape layer. A very good thing to remember is if you hold down Shift while you're drawing your points, it will either snap to the horizontal or the vertical, depending on how close you are. I think it might do diagonal. I'm not sure, you have to test that out, but it's a very handy shortcut to keep in mind. After that, I showed you a little bit more about drawing shape layers. Using the pen tool and how you can close them if you go back to the first point. Also about how styling works. So there's some tools at the top where you can set your style for the shape layer, strokes and fills, color. And then also you can open the shape layer to change those, which are kind of the main settings. We probably should have done that before actually drawing our pop, but hopefully it all clicks into place. After that, we went back to the first line that we'd drawn and rolled out the shape layer settings so that we could give it a thin round cap stroke, which is the style that we want for the pop. I also went and deleted the fill style inside the shape layer. It's not totally necessary to remove that because you can't see it anyway, but it's nice to keep things clean because it's just adding a load of settings that we're not using. So for the pop, just for now, we're just going to be using the stroke. I also touched on the anchor point of the layer, which is something that's not really necessary to worry about now. As long as you've followed me and made your pop in the middle of the comp, everything will be totally fine. But if you did want to know a bit more, it's basically the point around which everything moves when you animate a layer. So if you move position, but especially if you rotate something, so if you rotate a layer, it will rotate around its anchor point. So it's just something to keep in mind, but like I said, we don't need to worry about it right now. Amazing. So in the next lesson, we're going to look at animating our shape layer. We're going to make the motion look super slick and satisfying. So I'll see you there.